form of human life.
Where do we stand in the illusion it makes? What kind of space are we invited into?
The material relations between people become social relations between things. When we look at toasters, corn, and TVs, we don't
We
see
still, to a large extent, live in the interregnum between worlds, if you will, or between paradigms. Not many people in the history of the world have faced that.
Diet Soap is a Sublation Media podcast. All right, Sublation Media viewers and listeners, and all of you telepaths out there who read my mind every night. It's Matt Bender with me here today. He's from the Majority Report. He's also got his own podcast and YouTube channel. He writes for Medium. Is that
Mashable?
Mashable?
Yep. I write for a bunch of different sites too, though. Yeah, that's all.
Mm-hmm.
You got the podcast, Doomed, Scam Economy. Those are the two podcasts I do, and then that's everything. It's a lot, but
it's a lot.
Also, I forgot I got a stream on Thursday nights now with a bunch of great streamers like Lance of the Serfs and Mike of Humanist Report and David Dole of Rational National, Ola Yemi of it's called Leftist Mafia. You can check that out on all of our channels. It multi-streams just like we're doing now, where you're streaming on your channel, I'm streaming on mine.
That's great. So I am glad that you are willing to talk to me today. I know that I've been on a tear on Twitter.
Right.
I wanted to talk to people who are skeptical about the Twitter files because I want to win converts, because I'm extremely upset about what's come out from the Twitter files. And a friend of mine who agrees with me says I'm hysterical, which means you can be hysterical even if everything you believe is true.
Sure.
Like a jealous husband who's extremely jealous of his wife because he thinks that she's cheating on him.
Sure.
Can still be hysterical and acting out of line, even though if she is cheating on him. And I think that's what's going on with me.
Is this? Are you saying that Matt Taibbi is your wife in this scenario, or I'm a little bit?
I don't think Matt Taibbi is cheating on me. I hope not. No, I think that it's probably the United States government and that's been cheating on us all. And so, like, here's how I wrote this little preparatory statement, and I'll just say it without reading it. But anybody who's had has a history in left organizing, especially organizing protests against state policies, already knows what the security apparatus is like. We already know that they have us under surveillance, and they'll violently oppose our efforts to change their policies or protest their policies. I've had friends who've been detained at airports due to their politics, or I had a friend who was part of the environmental movement who was sent to jail because of some direct actions he did. And I, so I know that this isn't surprising. I think that's the thing that I get from most people on the left. It's like, Doug, this, of course, they're censoring our tweets, and of course they're reading our direct messages. They've been doing it for years. But nonetheless, I think that this is a point in time where we've reached a new stage in the long rollback of our civil liberties and the long, like, over 20-year attack on the American public. And so that's why I wanted to talk to you about what I thought the Twitter files were about today.
Yeah, I mean, I think that everything you mentioned in terms of what has been going on in terms of the national security state and it's from the Patriot Act. I think it's certainly a very big issue. I do diverge from you on comparing this to something like the Patriot Act in terms of the Twitter files. I also, don't see any sort of overlap there, honestly. But we'll discuss that. That's why we're here.
All right. So I guess I'm wondering where you see the difference between using what machine learning and collecting massive amounts of data from not just Twitter, but from all of the different social media streams in order to track the flow of data and then censor what people can say online, how that's different from tracking what people check out of the library, which was the first thing that was in the Patriot Act, like they would be allowed to ask librarians what we're reading.
Well, there's a huge difference between what's publicly available information, like anyone can log on to Twitter and read your tweets if you have a public account. People can do whatever they like with that data. We put it out there for that very purpose. That's a huge difference, if you ask me, between like the NSA listening in on our private phone calls and then them just monitoring someone's profile because someone's reported this individual for potential issues. I think that's a huge difference.
Well, let me describe to you what the EIP actually said that they did, because I and you can tell me if that's all, like if you and I could do that, if we would be able to do that. What they did was they gathered about 800 million tweets between right up until December of 2020, so for about 6 months, and then tracked it, basically analyzed it using machine learning for to find misinformation within those tweets. From there, they would track it down to the spreader accounts, and from then they would put in requests for those URLs to be in some way dealt with. That would be either
right. So let me just say that you or me can actually do that. We just don't have the technical know-how. It doesn't take a lot. In fact, I have a list of all 650,000 accounts that subscribe to Twitter Blue. I have there's a third-party researcher who simply uses Twitter's public API that's available for anyone who signs up for it, and he's able to basically use that Twitter API to find out exactly who subscribes to Twitter Blue, because it's right there in the publicly available data. And I use that for my reporting on Twitter Blue. This is actually very public information, and it's not, you and I just don't have the technical know-how, but it's not like something like super secret spy. Like you could just take a class and learn. It's not hard. It's very simple, actually. The social media information, if you're posting it on a public platform, it's very easy to pull. You could pull hundreds of millions of tweets from tracking specific keywords to seeing who mentions who. And from there, you could even go down the line and see, use this information to see who follows who. It's all there if you have a public account.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I wasn't so impressed. It wasn't so much as I was concerned about the lack of privacy on Twitter. It was the tracking of information and the sorting it into categories of disinformation. That was my problem. So it wasn't so much like, it's not the same as surveillance. Okay, it's a campaign of censorship rather than a campaign of just tracking and surveilling. But part of it has to do with surveilling. So I guess what we should skip to here, I mean, like, I guess you're right about how easy it would be. I think the EIP doesn't talk about direct messages.
It might be a little bit harder now, actually, because Elon Musk has put a very high price on unlimited data monitoring on the API. Previously, Twitter would let you pull millions and millions of tweets for free. Since Elon Musk came aboard, he's put a $42,000 a month price on that, which has stifled researchers and such. Not everyone's got $42,000. So in one way, Elon Musk has hurt that flow of information, which should be free for anyone to use however they'd like.
Well, okay. But the problem here is the combination, again, of the tracking of the data, including, I think, and now this isn't in the EIP report, but what I've heard is that including direct messages. So it's not just the things that you put out in public. And it would also, I guess, include locked accounts, but they wouldn't be that concerned with locked accounts for what they're doing. But it's a combination of labeling things as disinformation, categorizing things as misinformation, and then reporting it en masse, and the tracking. And the reason why this is a problem together is because the state is forbidden to limit the free press in any way. So when the state comes in, as they're doing, to monitor not just Twitter but all of the social media platforms, and then to set the terms of service for the companies and help with enforcement, that is a massive censorship campaign. It's a way of controlling information, which is what we don't want in a democratic society if we want to be able to organize politically against established power. So that's my problem. It's not just the surveillance.
Sure.
Or like I think, oh, well, they're breaking in the middle of the night to get the data. It's not that. I mean, I know you can gather data.
So I should just also say that I might have missed you saying it, but I saw a comment in the chat. There's never been any proof that I've seen that Twitter allowed unfettered access to any individual's DMs. So that's would be different from public information that you post on Twitter. I don't know if you said that or someone might have misheard, but there's been no proof that I've seen of access to direct messages.
In the article in Tablet, I believe it was by Jacob Siegel, he pointed out that when you tried to share the link to the New York Post Hunter Biden laptop story, that it would be censored even by direct message.
Oh, that's just basically a moderation tool that's put across. Like they're not actually reading your specific. They just put like a block on you.
How did they know it? Because some computer program somewhere knows that I.
Oh, because you were putting in but they couldn't read your individual could, according to, because they weren't encrypted. Twitter does have the access to your DMs.
Right.
That's every social media platform ever that doesn't use encrypted messaging has access to your DMs. The question is, did they provide that to anybody outside of a criminal investigation or something like that? And I've never seen any proof of that.
Well, in that case, the problem is not you're being charged or being tracked, but again, you're being censored and stopping you from communicating.
But who's doing the censoring though? Like we're discussing these social media platforms, and we're discussing and this is a major thing across all the Twitter files, and this is one of my biggest problems with Matt Taibbi's reporting. He never gets to a smoking gun. It's a lot of conjecture, it's a lot of hyperbole in his own writing, and then you read the screenshot of the document, and he never provides the full documentation. I wish he would. I would love to read these files in full. He just provides cut off screenshots. It does not match what he says in his tweets.
I think, Matt, I think the problem you're having is not so much that there's no smoking gun, but that there are too many. And so to pin down a smoking gun, well, let me explain.
Let's get to one. Yeah, let's get to one thing.
Okay,
yeah.
I'll give you three. Okay.
Okay, sure.
So the one that Media San brought up in his interview with Matt Taibbi, and that would be CISA, which is a sub-agency of the Department of Homeland Security, the EIP, which is the Electoral Integrity Partnership, and CIS, which is the Center for Internet Security. Those are the three organizations. Now, the Center for Internet Security has been around since 2008. It was originally started with $1 million grant from let's see, I have this written down, from the Department of Interior. Has also received grants from the Department of Homeland Security. And it is working in partnership, and this is in their own terms. This is what they say on their own website, with CISA, which is I forget what it exactly stands for, but CISA is the digital security agency within the Department of Homeland Security. So, and then there's CIS, there's the EIP, which is the Electoral Integrity Partnership and the
Right.
CISA. The Electoral Integrity Partnership was started to fill the gaps for the Department of Homeland Security, or CISA. That's according to Alex Stamos, the director. And again, now the problem here is that it's not just EIP, it's the Stanford Internet Observatory, which was given the grant money, but they've received about just under $4 million in grants to set up this tracking program and program on disinformation, to combat disinformation online. Now, the thing to remember about disinformation is that when you're talking about that, you're never talking about legally protected speech. I mean, you're never talking about illegal speech. You're always talking about legally protected speech. If it's called disinformation, that means it doesn't break the law.
Where's this information about the $4 million grant? I want to look that up.
That is that's the Stanford. It's on their own website, and then you have to go. I looked through U.S. funding to the government, but they got from the NSF, the National Science Foundation. They've got all told just under $4 million in funding to work on disinformation, on combating disinformation.
Okay,
now it went through Stanford. It didn't go to the EIP during the time when they were studying, collecting that data, which is so easy to do on Twitter. They really started getting the money after.
Wait, but hold on. The National Science Foundation is not like the CIA or the FBI, though.
No, nonetheless, the organization that got the grant is partnered with the Department of Homeland Security, and it was earmarked for combating disinformation. And disinformation is always legal speech. If it's illegal speech, you don't need any special agency to combat it because it would be covered, by the law as it stands. Disinformation is always just speech that the state decides is either intentionally wrong or accidentally wrong, or now true but inconvenient for the narrative or misleading in some way. Those are the three.
All right, so I'm looking on the Stanford Internet Observatory website right now, and it says, as part of Stanford University, the SIO receives gift and grant funding to support its work. In 2021, the SIO received a 5-year grant from the National Science Foundation, an independent government agency, awarding a total of $740,437 over a 5-year period to support research into the spread of information on the internet during real-time events.
Right. And that's one part of the 4 million that I mentioned. Then the problem is there's also the Washington brand, another organization connected to EIP, but it's like going through two different universities. The other 3 million roughly was given, I think it was to the Stanford Internet Observatory, but it may have been the Washington University division. The thing is, there's only about 3 people, and the director of the internet, the Stanford Internet Observatory, is the director of VIP, and he's a co-director of the Virality Project, which worked on tracking disinformation after the election on COVID. So they are this is a state-funded effort in this one instance, and this is just one instance.
All right, we don't have to get into the funding. I'll believe you.
Legal speech. No, I mean, you don't. Yeah, because I'll be glad to provide you.
No, but we should really get. I want to get into like the details. I think obviously, the funding could be relevant. The funding could not be. But we just both stated what we saw, and I think that's not really getting to the heart of it. So let's get it to the actual.
The heart of it is that they are partnered with the Department of Homeland Security, formed for this project, which was announced by the Department of Homeland Security ahead of time, that they were going to be going after and protecting us from disinformation. In 2017, the head of the Department of Homeland Security announced that all of American communications infrastructure was now under the jurisdiction of the Department of Homeland Security, which meant that they could secure it, and that included securing the flow of information. So that's what they're attempting to do. It's not just the Department of Homeland Security alone. It's also the FBI and the CIA and the State Department and the CDC and a bunch of other.
Right. We
alphabets.
we agree on there's the over extension the monitoring of the DHS from the DHS over our communications. But let's stick to what we're talking about regarding social media and what was in the Twitter files, because it doesn't make sense to talk about this area where we agree that's from well before this. Let's stick with, so give me an example of what you're saying that the Stanford Internet Observatory or the Virality Project or any of these other related groups.
Well, the Electoral Integrity Partnership and the Virality Project are the same people, just kind of changing their orientation or what they're concerned about, right? So it's the same organization coming out of Stanford and Washington University. They're just no longer interested in disinformation around the election, and instead interested in disinformation around COVID. Now, I didn't spend all day reading the report from the Virality Project, but that was reported in the Twitter files. But I didn't follow it up. But what I did with the Twitter file reporting on the Election Integrity Partnership, I think I keep getting the actual
EIP. We should say EIP. It's probably easier just to say that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I did read the long fuse today. And not every single page, but I skimmed the major parts that were significant to me anyhow, and which were the sections where you could figure out just exactly what they were doing to the tweets or what and how it was being handled. So the main thing that they did was what they're attempting to do is control the flow of information and limit how much disinformation, misinformation, or malinformation gets out online. So what they did was they gathered up, like I said at the start, about 800 million tweets. Then they broke it down into what they called incidents and narratives. So a narrative, there's events, then there's incidents, and then there's narratives. So the event in the world might trigger an incident. That would be somebody saying something about a real live event that is thought to be by the state to be either ill-informed or intentionally ill-informed or just a true story that they don't want people to hear. That would count as disinformation. So then that would be an incident when someone tweets about that or posts about that. And any given incident then could generate anywhere from, they said, 1,000 in their data set. I mean, it could generate, who knows, but
so
in the data set they collected anywhere from 1,000 to 7 million tweets was what they were looking at per incident. So for instance, one of the things that was disputed on Mehdi Hassan's interview, on his show, was whether or not there were 22 million tweets labeled as misinformation or only 480,000, I think it was, that was labeled as misinformation. And the way it worked was that they would try to track it down to spreader accounts and find the URLs that were where the information was originating and stop the spread of it by going after these big spreader accounts. That didn't mean that these people are big. It just meant that they were popular, right? So if they had a lot of followers or, they had a lot of people watching their YouTube videos, it could be on YouTube, that might be the place where the information was spreading from. So they flagged about 480,000 spreader accounts and sent that information to the platforms.
Sure.
Right. But they were to do that. What their goal was, well, first of all, they had to track almost a billion tweets, and then analyze it. But their aim was to stop other people from seeing that information and spreading that information. And for me, the iconic example of the kind of information that they're trying to stop would be Cy Hirsch's reporting on the Nord Stream pipeline. That is considered disinformation. Facebook has labeled it with a warning. And if you try to post it on Facebook, you're given the choice not to. You're said, look, there's a fact-checking organization that's looked at this article on Substack. It's determined that there's a better alternative answer to what happened. And if you post this, we will mark you as posting disinformation, and we will start to,
Right.
they don't
So
say shadow ban, but
I
they
think
say
every
yeah, go ahead.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I think everyone is following. What I'm not seeing is the connection to state censorship.
Okay, well, this is happening at the request of and under the initiative of the CISA, which is the Department of Homeland Security. These nonprofits are partnered with CISA. They've been hired out. It's as if I hired an assassin to kill you. The assassin would kill you, but I would be responsible. There's
Well,
something called entwinement.
that's definitely
Um,
that's not a good
It's
analogy.
a great analogy. It's a perfect analogy.
So
because,
someone is
because
forcing Twitter and Facebook to do all this. That we have details that this is that Mark Zuckerberg or Elon Musk or Jack Dorsey would be
well, you and I both
fined
know,
or thrown into jail.
You and I both know how social media has been handled into accepting, and they have accepted the secret, not police. This getting out of the security apparatus directing who they censor and how, and this has been done in public. There have been threats made by people like Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden, AOC, and others, saying if, for instance, Mark Zuckerberg doesn't toe the line and start getting rid of political content the state thinks is disinformation, the company will be broken up, or their right to be protected from litigation will be taken away. So there's that as a motivator. And in the media, it was reported like Zuckerberg said, hey, no, I don't think political speech should be censored on Facebook. And more pressure came, and he buckled. So we know it's been reported in the press that the state has put pressure on these companies, financial pressure basically, or the right to do business on these companies. But then there's also the additional pressure of just meeting with someone from Department of Homeland Security or the FBI on a regular basis. Which
Then why do these companies routinely ignore recommendations of what to take down and suspend?
Well, they I guess like anyone who's hired to do a job, they have some autonomy. Like I have someone who designs book covers for me, and if I told him exactly what to do and how to get the job done, the book covers would be far worse. So I still have hired him to do the job, and he still does it for me, even though I'm not holding his hand and directing each part of it. But also, when it comes to violating the First Amendment and individuals' rights, there's a lawsuit at the very least every single time any one tweet gets taken down through state direction. So we don't need to have 100% compliance by these tech companies in order to have a violation of the First Amendment. So I mean,
well,
so
there's been no violations of the First Amendment.
There's been tens of thousands of violations of the First Amendment.
Then why?
As soon as you accept two things,
what,
disinformation is legal speech, and these tech organizations.
Right, disinformation is legal. As far as I've seen,
on behalf of the Department of Homeland Security, both of which things aren't denied. These organizations are partnered with the DHS in one particular instance, and they have acted to take down tweets or censor them. So we know both these things are true. And they've announced that disinformation is legal speech. There's no part of this that isn't a violation of the First Amendment.
So you're telling me that there are numerous violations of the First Amendment, and they are related to people not being able to post certain content on the platforms owned and run by private corporations, by private companies.
Yeah, because the private corporations at this point are pretty much partnered with the state. And it's not very surprising given how their corporate America's interests ultimately aligns with the state and vice versa. I mean, it would not be so great for any of these multi-billion-dollar companies if the power of the U.S.
So
dollar.
so
to
so
suddenly
wait, so
hugely decline.
your argument is that Twitter and Facebook and YouTube are all publicly owned by the state, that we're living in, that we have a
My argument is that they are entwined with the state. That there's a I mean, if I were going to court, I would say that they were entwined with the state, and there's legal precedent for that.
and
And I
Elon
think
Musk
that I
too.
could win. Yeah, and Elon Musk should be sued. I mean, if people on the left were really had their heads screwed on straight about this issue, they would form a class action lawsuit and sue Elon Musk. He's liable for the violations of the First Amendment that were going on before he bought the company, because he bought the company and its liability, and he's liable for it going on now, which I'm sure it still is. This is not stopped because of Elon Musk, and none of this has anything to do with Elon Musk.
It has
It's
tons
Elon
to do
Musk
with
is
Elon Musk being
No,
that
Elon Musk is a complete distraction. I mean, he was dumb enough, narcissistic enough to let these files get out, but he's a complete distraction from the overall picture.
Well, he didn't.
The overall picture is not even just a U.S. picture. It's happening again in the EU, and it's happening, I'm sure, in South America. It's happening all over the world. That there's been a concerted effort since around 2016 to start trying to control the flow of information, because the public has been seen to be less manageable than it was, and they are working to openly combat what they call disinformation. And so in my opinion, disinformation is because it's legally protected speech. When you hear the word disinformation come from any public official, you should know what they mean is they don't want you to think independently. They want to control what you're thinking. They want to protect themselves. That's what anyone who talks about disinformation is saying. They consider the public to be their enemy, and they're at war with the public. So, okay, now.
So wait, there's a lot here. All right. So number one, in the United States of America, the most litigious country on earth, not one lawyer has decided to tackle one of these many numerous First Amendment violations. That's very interesting. My assumption is that because they know that there are none. Two.
Wait, say that again. What do they know there's not of? I got distracted by the chat.
Yeah, that there are no First Amendment violations in the most litigious country on earth. Not a single lawyer has decided.
RFK has filed a class action lawsuit. Okay, so yeah,
Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
Yes, right. So there's that. I mean, but yes, that's happened. But there will be more. I mean, this has not been out for that long. But yeah, there will be litigation, I'm sure. Just as after Edward Snowden made his revelations, there was litigation against Verizon. I mean, what you need to do, Matt, is give me an argument, not about empirical evidence. Like, on what basis can you have it be that legal speech is taken down by an organization working for the federal government?
Because they're not working for the federal government. You haven't proven any of that. But where's the proof?
I don't have to prove it because they've announced it.
Then that's your proof. Show me the announcement that.
Okay,
show me the announcement that they.
Do you want to go to the EIP? EIP
sure.
describes itself as partnered with the Department of Homeland Security.
Sure, to do the research work. Yes.
So if I am partnered with another corporation, that means I am working with them on the project. They're working with me, and I'm working with them. That means that the Department of Homeland Security is working with the EIP to censor information online. That's all you need to know.
The EIP doesn't do any censoring. All they do is send
Twitter
or Facebook.
No. That's not true.
They go into Twitter and Facebook, and they're blocking the information.
Matt, we walked through the process. It included
we did walk through the process.
Down accounts with the aim of stopping people from
information. They send information to Twitter. Twitter we're using Twitter as the example because it's the Twitter files discussion. They send information, links, tweets, whatever to Twitter saying, hey, we found this stuff. We believe it fits the categories of what your policies describe as misinformation.
Why are you trying to provide cover for the Department of Homeland Security? That's what the lawyers for the Department of Homeland Security would argue in court.
Because it's
I'm
just
sure
the truth.
That's what they would
it's
do.
just the truth of what's going on here. It's just the truth of what's going on here.
That's a bunch of crap. If it was the CIA under George W. Bush doing exactly this, there's not a chance in hell you would argue that the nonprofit working for the Bush administration that described itself as being in partnership with
they've been doing this since the Obama administration. They've been doing it before the Obama administration, but during the Obama administration, during the Trump administration, during the Biden administration,
they haven't been doing this. But let me just say, like, if it was during the Bush administration, you wouldn't make this kind of argument, which would not hold up, by the way. When you are partnered like that, then there's entwinement in court. And you and I both know that in reality, the EIP wouldn't exist but for the request of the Department of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security
researchers have been studying the spread of information
the Department of Homeland Security formed the EIP and funded the EIP. And the EIP was formed, in the words of Alex Stamos himself, to fill the gaps for the Department of Homeland Security. It doesn't have any project of its own. It doesn't exist on its own.
The Election Integrity Project. This is the one that studies the spread of electoral misinformation.
Disinformation. It didn't come into existence on its own. It doesn't have its own mission. It was formed through grants and money from the Department of Homeland Security for the Department of Homeland Security.
I don't know the history of EIP. So
I'll told you. Okay. And if you, and all you have to do is read the EIP website.
All right, but you still haven't done anything to prove to me.
No, I just did. You
didn't.
You're not. This is what's called a bad faith argument.
How is it a bad faith argument?
I'll tell you the definition of bad faith. Bad faith is when I give you the information, the argument, and instead of addressing it, you return to repeating your initial objection. I've overcome that objection. You need to move on to the next objection you might have, because that has been overcome. The EIP didn't exist before. CISA formed it. It was put into place to fight legal speech. That's what disinformation is. And that means that it is a violation of the First Amendment for what it's doing.
So if I own a website and I decide I don't want your post to go on that website, I'm violating your free speech rights. I'm violating the First Amendment.
Absolutely not.
So what's the difference here?
That's a disingenuous analogy, because if I own a website, okay, and you are hired by the state to take down things that I put on the website, to come to me and say,
but the state has not demanded it. The state has not demanded it.
Yes, it has.
Then why don't they take it all down? You have not told me why they don't listen to all of it.
Your one objection is because it's not 100% of all the reports that they put in, which are coming, by the way, from all over the place. They're not just, there's like all sorts of different people funneled through the EIP, because they haven't been 100%, but only 35%. Compliant.
35% is nothing. That's not even the majority. That's the vast majority. Why not 55%? Why not 75%? Why not 100%?
Why is it that? Why not like 1%? Why is it that when they
because 35% actually break their policies, dude? It's that simple.
It's that simple. By the way, let's go back to that. The policies aren't being set by these social media companies alone. They're being set by the Department of Homeland Security
by force. By force?
No, they're wait. So you're saying if they aren't doing it at literal gunpoint, but rather through coercion by threatening their business licenses, basically?
If any organization, any agency is welcome to provide any sort of background or any sort of information they want to any of these companies, if these companies accept it, which they seem to do. None of these companies have formed policies based
I don't know
on
if
that
that's
information.
True. I mean, I don't think that the state, given that's limited by the first, let me explain to people who might be curious as to why I care about free speech. Okay. Because the reason I care about free speech is because in order for a socialist movement to organize, we have to be able to communicate with one another. And then we have to be able to be critical of state policy and state ideology. When we have a state acting to censor our communication with one another, even when they're only successful 35% of the time, that puts a limit on the public's ability and the left's ability to organize in resistance and in order to change the foundation of society. When it is better and easier for a socialist movement to operate under formal freedom than to have that formal freedom taken away. So that's why I care. Okay. I don't care because I'm mad at the Democrats. I don't care because I'm trying to score points with this or that person. I don't care because I hate Elon Musk or I love Elon Musk. I care because I want to see some sort of independent movement for socialism take hold. And if we don't have the freedom to communicate with each other, we will have severe limitations on how well we can organize together. So that's what I would like to say first. So secondly, this idea that 35% compliance is not
Where's that
high enough.
35% number even from, by the way?
That's from the Long Fuse, EIP's own reporting
Okay.
about Twitter compliance. So, and they are working, of course, to improve that. They're also, so another thing to think about is what the training means, because the training is not just, training on general principles of what counts as disinformation or misinformation, but it also it means like evaluating real events and deciding what the official narrative is going to be. And an example would be them doing this in advance of the Hunter Biden laptop story leaking. So there was, now in this particular case, the connections to the security state are not as firmly established as with the EIP. The Aspen Institute was formed on its own. Okay, it's not. It has a lot of different things that it does, and I wouldn't say it only formed at the request of the security state at all. And it also, its only goal is not to fight disinformation. There's a lot of things that the Aspen Institute does. So I'm not. There are lots of people who I know who've been to Aspen Institute events who are great people. But in this one case, the Aspen Institute put on an event called the Hack and Dump disinformation event or something like that. And they got a whole bunch of journalists, social media employees, and also State Department officials and some FBI people together to run a war game like scenario on what to do if a disinformation event happened, like people started reporting that they had Hunter Biden's laptop, and how to suppress the story. That happened about a month before the laptop story actually broke. It was after a year of the FBI having the laptop.
Yeah,
Now,
these
the reason why that's
organizations do all
important,
sorts of run-throughs of events and stuff. I mean, you're also gonna.
the
I hope
reason
you're not
that's
one of those people
important,
who also are gonna tell me that the World Health Organization ran some sort of pandemic preparation for COVID. That means they manufactured COVID. I hope you're not one of those guys too. These organizations
not
run
at all.
all
But
sorts of stuff like this.
when the FBI has a laptop for a year and then sets up an event on what to do if that laptop becomes public, it's not the same thing. It's not a conspiracy theory to say they were trying to create a situation where the story would be suppressed when it went public, because that's what they trained the journalists to do, to suppress the story. So, I'm not making some wild conspiracy theory up, but it's documented. The FBI had the laptop when Aspen Institute ran this hack and dump workshop and trained journalists to suppress it. The reason this matters to me is because, in general, the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI and CIA are aware of world events, and they are aware of what's in the interest of the state for people to think about those events. So if they have the capacity to tell journalists what's disinformation and what isn't, they're going to tell the journalists that stories that make them look bad, that make the U.S. government or the military look bad, are disinformation, and they're going to train journalists ahead of time not to report those stories. And we can see an example of that recently with the story, the Pentagon paper leak through Discord, and how they trained. And one of the things that they've been training journalists to do is to break with the actual Pentagon paper principle, which in '68, when the Pentagon papers leaked, Nixon had Ellsberg's psychiatrist office broken into so he could find, evidence of some sort of psychological malady in Ellsberg and get people distracted, I guess, about Ellsberg's sex life and not worried about what the Pentagon papers said, which was that, we've been bombing Vietnam in Vietnam for much longer than the public had been told. And, Johnson administration had been lying to the Congress and the public. They didn't want that information known, so they tried to distract people onto Ellsberg himself as the main topic of the conversation. And so the same thing happened with this Discord guy. I don't know much, but a lot of conversations went out around like, who is he? What's his character? Not so much about the substance of the actual leak, what was in the papers that were leaked.
Well,
And
the big difference between those two cases is that one was leaked for ideological, political reasons, wanting to get information out there. Another was leaked because some 20-year-old kid was
Matt, you're doing it
stroking
yourself right now. You're breaking
That's
the
exactly
Pentagon.
that's
No, Matt,
exactly
you're
what
doing
the
it
reason.
yourself right
I
now.
don't fucking follow no Pentagon principle, man. What are you talking
Why
about?
not? Why wouldn't you? Why would you want
because
to
I think
report
it's
on
actually important.
Ellsberg?
I think it's actually
Why would you want
important to
report on
find out.
Ellsberg's
I
sex
think it's
life
actually
rather than the substance.
Oh,
of
I don't
what's in
care
the
about
leaked
I don't care about
papers.
Ellsberg's sex
Well,
life.
why is it that you want to
Just like I don't care about this,
character
just
of
like
the
I don't care
person
about this kid's sex
rather-
life.
Why is it that you want to report on the character of the person rather than the substance
I think it's
of
important.
the news?
I think it's
not in
important to
my
know.
interest as a
Can you
member
let
of
me
the
answer the
public
question? Do you
or
want me
a
to answer the
socialist.
question? Do
No,
you want me to
it's
answer the
rhetorical.
question?
No,
Do
I
you want me-
don't. This is
Oh,
rhetorical.
okay.
This
So you
is
don't want me to answer the
rhetorical.
question. All right. You don't
You
want
know,
me to answer
because
the
you don't
question.
have
All right.
you whatever
All right.
answer you give
All
is
right.
going to be
All right.
irrelevant.
All right.
Obviously, the
One
Pentagon
was a
pays their
whistleblower.
principal.
One wasn't. It's that simple. One actually wanted to disseminate
So what?
information for the good of
The
public.
information was useful to the
That's
public.
the
in
same
both
problem.
cases.
That's the same problem with Elon Musk giving Matt Taibbi his
Are you
cherry-picked
trying to
information
win
for the
points
Twitter
to get into
files.
heaven, or are you
No.
trying to do politics?
What are
Because
you talking
if you
about?
want,
I'm
if you want
explaining
people
to you exactly
feel
the
like,
issue between
"Oh,
these
I
issues,
don't want to
these
support.
things, man.
I don't want to. I
I'm
don't want
trying to
information
explain to
coming
you
from
these things.
bad sources. Bad
I think it
people
is
to be known,
important to find out why
regardless
someone
of
wants
how
to spread
relevant
certain
it is
types
to
of
the public.
information. I do
Jesus
think it's
Christ,
important.
Matt.
I
You know
do
what?
think it's important. I think it's
It's
important
really
to find out
very
why people.
It's incredibly
Right.
disappointing to me.
I'm
that-
sorry to
that
disappoint
take
you.
that
I don't really
position.
care if you're disappointed in me. I mean, I really don't give a
wouldn't
shit.
expect that you. I wouldn't expect that you would, but nonetheless, it's disappointing. You know,
Okay.
and the
All
reason
right.
why is because
Just like I'm disappointed in the turns of other certain people, like Matt Taibbi, basically doing the PR work of Elon Musk. It's very
Could you tell me
disappointing
one
to me.
thing? Could you tell me one thing in the Twitter files that's given him exposure legally that counts as propaganda for like helping Elon Musk?
The whole idea
But one thing
behind
that
this-
he reported.
the whole idea behind
no one thing he actually
I'm-
said in the Twitter files, not your idea of what they meant symbolically to you in your head. What
it's-
was reported in the Twitter files?
Okay,
that
the
helped
very first Twitter files was about the censorship of information based on the Biden's campaign recommendation, and they turned out to be nudes, unconsensual nudes, non-consensual nudes of Hunter Biden. Matt Taibbi never disclosed that, just put it out there as if, hey, look, the Biden campaign asked for this stuff to be taken down, and Twitter just right away took it down without mentioning to his audience that these were non-consensual naked photos of Hunter Biden.
How?
Yes, because his
how did that do PR work for Elon Musk?
his whole point of promoting his version of Twitter and what he's been doing and what he's been transforming the website into is to stoke the idea that he's Mr. Free Speech and he would never do what the old Twitter would do, even though he's doing much worse.
That's something that Matt Taibbi said in the Twitter files, is that
No,
Elon
it's
Musk
not.
is Mr. Free Speech. No, but nothing.
No,
first
I
of
told
all-
you the Hunter Biden stuff. I told you. Taibbi
Yeah, Hunter Biden
disseminated those links without providing his audience the important context. These weren't secret information that would take down Joe Biden's campaign. This wasn't secret information that was going to help Donald Trump win an election. They were fucking non-consensual nudes of Joe Biden's son that they asked Twitter to take down because it's against their policy.
Did you read the actual story? I mean, look, the thing about the
That's
first,
the main.
very first,
That's the first
the
Twitter
very first
files,
Twitter-
man. That's the
That-
thing
that's
they
not-
thought was the
that-
most
that's-
important.
that is what
was
Mehdi
the
Hassan. That is what
No,
Mehdi
dude,
Hassan
that's what I
and the
saw the
Democrats-
first day.
I
Dude,
read it. I
it
read
was
it.
my reporting
No,
the first day of the Twitter files.
Yeah, what it said was it reported on all the different conversations that had gone on around whether or not to allow the New York Post story.
We didn't
which
need
did
those
I
Twitter
admit
files. I'll tell you why I
have
don't
a-
need those
have-
Twitter files because it
which did
came
have-
out in October of 2020. I reported it in October of 2020. Twitter came out. They blocked the New York. We knew this in 2020, October 2020.
The New York
Then
Post.
it came out.
The New York Post article.
The New York
The New York
Post.
Post
The
article.
New York Post dropped an article about Hunter Biden's laptop. Twitter wrongly, without any information whatsoever about what was actually in those links, decided to block it. It was wrong for them to do then. I said that then. numerous journalists from the mainstream to independent media said it was wrong for Twitter to do. Within
and what
hours,
did Matt Taibbi say
within
that you disagree with
hours,
in the Twitter files? And can you show me what and read it to me what he said?
what are you talking about?
What did Matt Taibbi say in the first Twitter file report that you disagree with, given what you just said about
I just
wrong?
told you.
What did read it to me.
Read
me your source.
You want me
read
to
me
get
your
to?
source, Matt. Yeah.
Okay, I can get to.
Read me what he wrote that you disagree with.
Sure, if you give me a second to go to Twitter files number 1, dude, I'll give you. I don't have it up on my computer.
Yeah, I'll give you a minute. I can bring it. I'll try to bring it up too.
All right. Here we go. December 2nd. This is post number 8. Matt Taibbi. By 2020, requests from connected actors. Wait, maybe we should just read from the beginning because there was a point where he said, no, we can start number 8.
Go ahead and read that. Go ahead and read
that.
Okay. And then we can
number 8. By 2020, requests from connected actors.
What was the date on the tweet?
December 2nd, 2022. By 2020, requests from connected actors to delete tweets were routine. One executive would write to another, more to review from the Biden team. The reply would come back handled. And then there's a screenshot of an email, private email between Twitter employees, more to review from the Biden team with multiple links. Thanks all. Someone replied.
And what are those links?
Those links were all taken down by Twitter. But
what were they to?
They all included naked, nude photos.
Each one of those was to a naked photo?
They all are on archive.org. I believe 1, 2, 3, 4. I believe 4 of the 5 were archived by archive.org, the Internet Archive, and all 4 of them were nudes of Hunter Biden.
All 5 of those were all just to nudes. That's all they were.
Just nudes of Hunter Biden. And you don't have to believe me. There are multiple reporters who fact checked this, who checked it out, who went to, and you even copy those tweets.
What's the next tweet?
Sure.
After that.
Celebrities and unknowns alike could be removed or reviewed at the behest of the political party. And then there's 2 tweets from a report from DNC. And then it says, I grabbed the first one under SI, defer to safety on the high profile second one. So basically, someone with the Biden campaign or the Democratic Party saw 2 tweets. I remember the real James Woods tweet was also a Hunter Biden nude. I remember that one. I don't know what the Stephen other one is off the top of my head, but the real James Woods one was also a nude tweet of Hunter, a photo of Hunter Biden.
So you're saying that Taibbi reported that in order to make Biden look worse than he actually did.
I mean, how else do you take that? If you don't at least put that these were nudes of Hunter Biden, I mean, that's probably the one scenario where even you would agree, yeah, those should probably come down if they're not.
No, yeah, anyone would agree that if they're only links to they're not links to the New York Post article.
They're
which
not
then
links to the New York Post article. Nope, those are nudes of Hunter Biden. I mean,
Okay,
you're welcome to fact check them and check them out.
Yeah, no, I agree. I know. I think probably that in that instance, asking those things to be taken down is fine. What I'll say this to you, and I'll grant you this. Okay, like when I read the very first Twitter files, report, I didn't think it was doing great PR work for Elon Musk, and I still don't think it was. It may have been making Biden look bad, but I didn't think it was a huge story because, Twitter has a liberal bias, maybe. All right. So what?
They have a corporate bias. They do whatever's going to make them the most money. That's what it is. That's what all these companies do.
Maybe. I mean, I think that there are limits. I mean, it's kind of complicated, but yeah, like Twitter is a publisher. They have the right to curate the content how they see fit, as far as I'm concerned. When they are a private,
they don't pay for these.
They're kind of a publisher, but I mean, like when PragerU took them to court, they were given the right, First Amendment rights, like a publisher would be. They have the right to curate the content and set their own terms of service. If they were a public forum, then they would be bound by the First Amendment again. So they're treated like a publisher, it seems to me. Otherwise, they're stuck, even when they anytime they censor legal speech by their users.
Well, I mean, if I ran a platform, I should be able to decide what goes on there or not. And if I don't want,
not if it's a public platform, not if it's like a public.
Well, no, you can't. You actually can. I mean, it happens all the time. I mean, Truth Social wants a conservative social network.
Well, then you're acting like a publisher, not like a, you're giving the rights of a publisher.
Well, the whole point of content, the whole point of content moderation.
It doesn't really matter. I'm not a lawyer, but the point is
no. But I think it's important to understand that these companies do content moderation basically because they want to make a platform that's going to bring them the most advertising. That's pretty much what it comes down to. That's what it's all about.
Right, but
none of these, like Twitter's not a Republican, Twitter's not a Democrat. There might be people who work there that have certain feelings, but at the end of the day, the point is to make money, especially if they're a publicly traded company that they have shareholders to abide to. Now, if they're a private company like they are now, it's a little bit more different.
I don't use advertising on the Sublation magazine, but I could, right? And I would have the right to publish what I wanted at Sublation magazine,
right?
And I might be influenced by the advertising that I get as to what I'll publish, and especially if that's all I got for revenue is advertising, I most definitely would be. But in the case of these public platforms, it's the fact that they're given, the reason they're considered public platforms at all is because they have protection from litigation. Like I could be
DMCA,
sued.
right?
Right. Yeah. I could be sued if I printed something that was libelous to someone or
well, the DMCA protects them from that as a platform.
Right. So right. But nonetheless, despite that, they're not really considered a public platform. There's still the rights of a publisher to curate their content. That's the only point I'm making.
Well, the DMCA actually doesn't make any sort of designation between publisher or platform. Basically, any sort of website is covered by the DMCA. It doesn't matter if you're
right. In terms of when that distinction is usually made, that if someone, hey, publishers aren't protected from litigation, but so therefore some other kind of rights might apply to these.
I think people should understand the difference. Like if the New York Times can't be held liable for something that someone comments in the comment section of their website under the DMCA. However,
but if
as
a
publisher,
they could.
No, not even. Well, that's a separate thing. Even on the website, if they pay someone to write an article for them, then they publish it. That's a whole different relationship.
What if someone wrote a letter to the editor and they published it?
Well, I'm assuming that's not paid. That's not. I mean, I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe that's some gray area. I don't know.
Yeah, because I think the protection from litigation is just a matter of it being an internet company, and
I mean, because New York Times doesn't choose to publish the comment. That's an automatic thing. And if it is something illegal, they have.
We should get a lawyer.
I think it's part of. But it's interesting conversration. I think it's a good. It's a good question about letters to the editor. No, go ahead. What's next?
But going back to the thing about, I got distracted. Going back to the thing about Matt Taibbi in that first report. What I remember about the first report, is, by the way, I don't know how many there's been. I think something like 21 different Twitter file drops, right? So it's only been since the information.
I'm sorry, I said DMCA because I was thinking of something else. I meant to say Section 230 is what protects.
Section 230, yeah,
right. Platforms and publishers. I was actually writing an article earlier today about copyright on the internet. That's why I had DMCA in my head.
Anyway, it's only since the story came out about the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the CIA, and which then led me to read up on all of the different attempts around the world to control information, that I started to get so passionately interested in this topic. It was not because I gave a shit about Elon Musk, okay? And it was not because I had a dog in the fight around Twitter. I don't. The reason I care about this is for the reason I gave before, which is I am a socialist, and I think that having the right to organize politically and have free speech is very important. And also I read this article by Jacob Siegel that was in Tablet, I think it was called The Hoax of the 21st Century. And one of the things he points out is that this is considered a whole of society effort to fight disinformation. And that means that it's trying to sweep in the entirety of the flow of information to make sure no disinformation gets in. It's
I would say it's a noble effort to make sure that everyone has true factual information.
But you trust the state to the top?
I'm not talking about the state. I'm not talking about the state. I'm talking.
Well, no, but these are state organizations that are doing this. This is the Department of Homeland Security declaring a whole of society effort to control disinformation. Okay, to fight disinformation. That means the Department of Homeland Security thinks it has the right to tell you what's true and what's not.
Oh no,
And
I'm not
that's
saying. I'm
going to
not saying.
change from week to
Listen,
week, by the way.
we could discuss what the role of different government agencies should be, but you're also claiming that every one of these organizations that study research disinformation and misinformation are all owned by Big
I didn't
Brother, and
no,
that's just not the case,
I
though.
didn't claim every one of them was owned by Big Brother. I never said anything about Big Brother. I said the EIP in specific was and yeah, in specific was formed at the request of the Department of Homeland Security and with Department of Homeland Security funds.
Well, because it's an electoral disinformation issue. I think that's actually
So you think the Department of Homeland Security should decide what's true or false
Well, do you think
about
people
reporting about
do,
around the
do, do,
election?
do you think people should be able to run campaigns telling people that election day is on a completely different day?
I don't think that the Department of Homeland Security should be concerned of what individuals tweet, even about that. But that's not the
Oh,
full scope of what,
if someone's making a joke or something, that's something different.
right.
But if there is
So you would be comfortable having the Department of Homeland Security tell you what you can say
well, it's against the law.
in the context of a U.S. election.
It's actually against the law to do.
It's not against the law in every state. Actually, there's different state by state. But in terms of you're comfortable with the Department of Homeland Security having the right to tell you.
Well, there was a right.
Election.
There was a
And
case
what
right.
counts as no, let me just ask you directly, yes or no.
In certain
Are you
cases,
comfortable with the Department of Homeland Security telling you what's true and what's false
I think
in
if
the
someone,
context of a U.S. election?
I think if someone is trying to disenfranchise certain types of voters, running a campaign to spread lies about the election, I think that's illegal. And there was actually a case that just went to trial of a right-wing influencer who specifically targeted Black and Latino.
Never illegal speech. Disinformation is never illegal speech.
It was illegal
because he was just. That's right.
His campaign.
You don't need a campaign against disinformation to fight fraud. Fraud is not legally protected speech. Police can go after. No, you don't have to pull up anything. Fraud doesn't count as disinformation. That's defined by the state. Disinformation is not illegal speech. That's fraud, obscenity, what else? The threats.
Department of Justice.
Those are not.
Department of Justice. Social media influencer charged with election interference stemming from voter disinformation campaign.
That's fraud.
But it uses the word disinformation. It's election interference. Yeah. This guy basically ran.
What are they charging him with?
Let's see right here. This is January, March. Convicted of election interference.
Interference?
Yes. Douglas Mackey, also known as Ricky Vaughn, was convicted today in federal jury in Brooklyn of the charge of conspiracy against rights stemming from his scheme to deprive individuals of their constitutional right to vote. The verdict followed a 1-week trial before blah blah blah.
Was it fraud?
It says that he
charge of
conspiracy against rights. That's what it says. Let me look up exactly what that constitutes.
So the state is stepping in to protect voters.
Conspiracy against rights is a federal offense in the United States of America if two or more persons conspire to injure, oppress, threaten, or intimidate any person in the free exercise or enjoyment of any right or privilege secured to him by the Constitution of laws in the United States or because of having so exercised the same. Basically, this guy ran a massive disinformation campaign trying to convince Black and Latino voters that they could text message their vote in. And this was such a large campaign.
So there was already a law in the books to protect this guy. There didn't need to be a Department of Homeland Security disinformation camp war on disinformation for them to arrest this guy for committing fraud or conspiring to block the rights of.
Well, we don't know how we don't know how they found out about this. Maybe it came out in the trial. But also there was no effort in terms of trying to reach out to people who fell for it because I guess there wasn't anything set up to reach out to those people and let them know.
The point is that there's already a law in the book. There's no reason to censor disinformation which is legal speech.
Right, but if this guy didn't get if this guy didn't get to do this, then basically, well,
This
he
guy,
wouldn't be going.
who's this guy? You
he
mean the
would-
guy who conspired against these?
Yes, this
people?
Ricky Vaughn, this right wing influencer who started this campaign. And I actually think he's the charge while he was convicted and he should be punished in some way. I actually think that the possible punishment is actually too much, and I'm totally against what this guy's doing.
My point was that that disinformation is defined as basically untrue statements that are untrue on purpose, accidentally untrue, or true but lead people to the wrong conclusions or make them think the wrong narrative. That's how they're defining these things. They're not, when you're talking about speech that breaks the law,
disinformation could break
takes
the law.
away someone's rights. What did it? It tried to trick people into going to the wrong voting place or go on the wrong.
Yeah, told them they could text message to vote. They didn't even have to go to vote.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So that was a trick to try to get people to vote the wrong way, and he was found guilty of that. Whether or not he should have been sentenced the way he was or not, there was already a law on the book. They didn't invent something.
Right. Sure. Right. Sure. But shouldn't we try to stop or at least find ways to get people the correct information and maybe even stop this fake this disinformation from tricking people to begin with, so these people would have never been disenfranchised in the first place?
Well, I don't know. I don't think in that case there was any, if I'm remembering the story correctly, there was anyone who reported actually using the number to try to vote. But they don't know because they have no idea. Right. But I don't think that I'm willing to trade the right to have legally protected speech heard for empowering the state to take down what they consider to be disinformation willy-nilly. I mean, if I'm violating some sort of, if I'm committing fraud against people by saying, hey, you can vote this way and tricking them so they don't vote, then that's already protected. There's already a crime. We don't need to invent, a power to censor in order to penalize people for breaking the law.
Well, I'm not saying
if I threaten people, with violence,
I mean, I'm
that's
sure
a threat. I don't need to have disinformation campaigns to stop threats.
Well, platforms actually do say that you can't threaten people on their website.
Right. And that's because that's illegal. That's illegal. No, it is. If it rises to the level of an actual,
but it doesn't even need to rise to that. They don't allow it. You could just tweet to somebody KYS on Twitter to kill yourself, and they'll take down your post. They'll block the post.
Right. Okay.
That's not illegal to do that.
Well, the problem here is that when you get the state involved, now I think that probably is beyond the pale and violates the First Amendment. That's why we shouldn't have the state entwined with these organizations if we want to be able to have First Amendment rights. But the real problem here is the amount of control that's being exerted on the flow of information by the Department of Homeland Security. If some website wants to have very high community standards that's privately owned and isn't being directed by the Department of Homeland Security and trained on the picture of the world that should be propagated through the website, that's completely different than an effort to train all of social media and every news organization on what counts as official truth in America and around the world. I mean, and by the way, again, going back to the Long Fuse report, that's what they're planning on doing. Okay. They're planning on training all newsrooms and training every social media organization on what constitutes disinformation. And again, anytime the state tells you what's disinformation, like, for instance, who blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, and whether it's Seymour Hersh or some, Norwegian intelligence agents that wants to give you the truth, it's up when they tell you what the truth is about that, or they try to tell you what the truth is about the situation in Ukraine and what's acceptable to say and what's not to say, what you can't say about Ukraine, that is trying to form your political perspective for you. That's trying to stamp out your right to think for yourself and to organize politically. And that's why I absolutely oppose the Department of Homeland Security and the Psychological Defense Agency in Sweden and the EU's various disinformation campaigns, why I oppose all of it. And listen, I got to go. by the way.
All right.
But can I just read you a statement from Guy Debord on this? Because okay,
sure.
that's why I want to close it out, because Guy
Who's
Debord
that?
Guy Debord was a radical Marxist involved with the student worker strikes of May of 1968, and in his comments on the Society of the Spectacle, the book that he wrote in 1988, about 20 years after his most famous book, the Society of the Spectacle, he wrote about disinformation.
Sure.
And he said, the confusionist concept of disinformation is pushed into the limelight instantaneously to refute it by the very noise of its name. All critique that has not been sufficiently made to disappear by the diverse agencies of the organization of silence. For example, it could one day be said, should this appear desirable, that this text is a disinformation campaign against a spectacle, or indeed, since it is the same thing, a piece of disinformation harmful to democracy. So anyway, that's how I want to close out. Thanks for restreaming to your own channel. I'm sorry I got paternalistically disappointed in you in the middle of this conversation. Maybe we can talk again sometime.
No, it's fine. Yeah, sure. I mean, I know you got to go. There's still a lot to talk about. Yeah, sure.
Okay.